Imagine a world where things just, where they just work. You know, bridges stand strong, pipelines transport stuff safely, products meet expectations.
Yeah.
What's the hidden architecture behind all this reliability?
It's so easy to take for granted, isn't it? We interact with this stuff daily, hardly give it a second thought.
Right.
But without it, honestly, the modern world would just stop.
Absolutely. I mean, think
Yeah.
about the chaos, the potential disasters if everyone just made it up as they went along. These documents, they aren't just about stopping things from falling down.
No, not at all.
They're like the operating system for modern industry.
Yeah.
Driving efficiency, making sure things fit together, saves billions, probably countless lives, because we don't have to check every single nut and bolt from scratch.
Exactly.
And today, that's what we're diving into, this often overlooked but totally critical world of codes and standards.
Yeah, and our guide for this is a really good document. Focuses right on these elements, especially for inspection and quality management. It's got precise definitions, practical examples, a pretty clear map through what can seem like a jungle of rules and jargon.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to unpack these ideas, help you tell the difference between, say, a standard and a code or a specification, and really get why they matter. By the end, you won't just know what they are, you'll see their purpose, how they ensure quality, fitness for purpose, out to the real world. Okay, so let's get practical. An inspector, maybe on a big construction site, what are they actually using day to day? Our source says while the contract specification is key,
Right, the contract's central.
knowing about these supporting normative documents is crucial.
That's a really important starting point. And that term, normative document, is kind of the big umbrella. It covers anything that provides rules, guidelines, characteristics for activities, or their results. So yeah, standards, technical specs, codes practice, regulations, they all fall under this. It's about creating that common language, that agreed upon quality level.
Right. Normative document is the umbrella. Makes sense.
Right.
But under that, standard feels like the big one, the one people hear most. What does our source say makes a standard a standard?
Well, the key things are it's established by consensus, approved by a recognized body.
Consensus. Okay.
Yeah, and its purpose is to provide guidelines, rules, characteristics for common repeated use, aiming for, I like this phrase from the source, the optimum degree of order in a specific context.
Optimum degree of order. I like that too. It captures it perfectly. Do we have a solid example, something specific?
Yeah, the source mentions BSEN ISO 17637. It's for non-destructive examination of fusion welds visual examination.
Visual examination. Okay.
So think about a weld. Looks okay outside, maybe? But this standard gives inspectors the precise checklist, the method, to spot even tiny surface flaws. It's that critical first check, before you get into more complex tests. It standardizes how you look.
Got it. So the standard defines what good looks like or how to check it. Now, what about a code of practice? Are they similar? Is there overlap?
That's a good question. They can seem similar, but a code of practice often leans more towards how you do something complex, effectively, and safely. It recommends practices or procedures for, say, design, manufacturing, installation, maintenance.
So more about the process.
Exactly. For equipment, structures, products. And interestingly, a code of practice can be a standard or part of one or stand alone. It's really about recommended best practices for bigger, more involved things.
So standard sets the benchmark. Code of practice gives the roadmap to get there. Where would we typically see these codes used?
The source points to things like pressure vessels, bridges, pipelines, tanks. These all rely heavily on very specific codes of practice to ensure they're safe and work properly throughout their whole life. You wouldn't want every bridge to be a brand new experiment, right?
Definitely not. Okay, now let's nail down specification. This sounds like where we get really granular, the fine details.
Absolutely. A specification states the precise requirements, needs, or expectations for a particular thing or a service. It covers physical stuff, technical requirements, like visual inspection results, NDT, that's non-destructive testing.
Right, checking without breaking it.
Exactly. Or mechanical testing results. It's the detailed list of requirements, and it's usually implied or stated as obligatory, often part of a contract.
So if I'm ordering, steel plate for a ship, the specification tells me exactly what that plate must be, chemically, how strong, everything. Any examples?
Precisely that. Think specifications for plate, pipe, forgings, castings, valves, very specific items. The source also gives actual standard numbers like BS 4515. That's a specification for welding of steel pipelines on land and offshore. That document ensures the gas pipe coming to your house was welded correctly, basically. It details everything, the electrode type, the weld angle, the testing, that level of detail.
Wow. Okay, so with all this detail and importance, it feels like there must be some legal force behind some of these.
Yeah.
Is that where regulation and authority fit in?
You got it. A regulation is a binding legislative rule, and it's adopted by an authority.
Makes sense.
An authority is just a body with legal powers and rights. Then you have your regulatory authority. They prepare or adopt the regulations. And the enforcement authority, well, they enforce them. This is how standards and codes can become actual legal requirements.
So the whole system, broad normative documents containing standards, codes of practice, maybe specifications, and these can be made legally binding by regulations from an authority. It's quite layered.
It is.
Beyond those core ones, the source mentions other operational documents too. Things used even more day to day.
Yes, a few more key terms. A procedure, that's a specified way to do something, an activity or process, usually written down, outlining key steps and precautions.
Like a recipe.
Sort of, yeah. Then an instruction is even more detailed, the precise steps to follow, often based directly on a procedure, standard, code, or spec, step by step.
Okay. And the last one was quality plan. What's that? Like the project manager for quality.
That's a pretty good way to think about it. A quality plan specifies exactly which procedures and resources get used, by whom and when for a specific project, product, process, or contract. It maps out how quality will be managed for that specific job.
Got it. Tailoring the general rules to the specific situation. Okay, so we've kind of laid out the family tree of these documents. But the big question, so what, is why? What's the real-world impact? Our source stresses that core purpose is ensuring structures or components have an acceptable level of quality and be fit for purpose.
And this is really where it hits home. These aren't just pieces of paper. They're what stop bridges collapsing, pipelines leaking, medical devices failing.
Right.
They translate complex engineering into practical guidelines, a common baseline for safety, for reliability across so many industries. They are, fundamentally, about confidence in the things we build and use.
It sounds incredibly thorough. But, practically speaking, what are the headaches? What challenges does an inspector face actually using these documents? They can be dense, right?
They change. Oh, absolutely. Especially if you're less experienced. Real-world situations don't always fit neatly into the boxes.
So what happens then, if you're unsure?
The guidance is very clear. If in doubt, the inspector must always refer to a higher authority. Always. To avoid confusion, potential problems, it shows there's a structure, accountability built in, a chain of command for those tricky calls.
That makes sense. Speaking of structure, the source talks about quality manuals too, QA manuals, QC manuals. How do they fit in?
Okay, so the Quality Assurance Manual, the QA manual, that sets out the company's overall approach. Its organization, responsibilities, how departments link up. It covers the whole company structure, its philosophy on quality, not just the factory floor, it's the big picture strategy.
The high-level view. So the QA manual is the company's quality promise. Then the QC manual, quality control, the source says that's the one an inspector, maybe a welding inspector, uses more often. What's in that?
Yeah, the QC manual gets down to the operational details, how specific departments and operations are organized and controlled, practical stuff.
Like what?
Like procedures for controlling drawings, how materials are bought and tracked, how welding procedures are actually developed, qualified, used on the job. It lays down the specific control procedures for all the operations that directly affect quality. It connects the company's QA philosophy to the actual work being done.
Okay, that distinction is clear, from the overall philosophy down to the step-by-step on the shop floor. Now, let's talk about the documents themselves again, because they aren't static, are they? They have numbers, years, like BS 45151-2009.
Exactly. And just knowing the number isn't enough. You have to know its status. Our sources table shows things like current, superseded, canceled, partly superseded. This shows they're living documents, constantly updated, refined.
It's not just bureaucracy.
No, it's a response to new materials, maybe lessons learned from failures, new technologies. It means the whole system is dynamic, it learns, it improves based on real-world feedback.
Can you give an example of how that works, how a standard might change?
Sure. Take BS 499-1-2009. The table shows it's superseded, replaced by BSEN ISO 256E.2005. That's pretty common. Standards get updated, maybe replaced by newer versions, often ones that are harmonized internationally. It means the industry learned something, found a better way.
So they evolve. What about one that's still in use but maybe needed a tweak?
Right, like BS 2633 from 1987. It was amended in 1998, but it's still listed as current. So still valid, but maybe with minor updates via amendments like little patches or clarifications. You also see AMD for amended, or COR for corrected in the comments sometimes, little fixes.
And some just disappear, like BS 1821, 1982, canceled. But what about partly superseded? That sounds like it could be confusing.
It really can be. For example, BS 1453, 1972, even though it was amended later, is partly superseded by a newer standard, BS EN 12536.200. This means some bits of the old standard are gone, replaced, but other parts might still apply.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to be really careful to know which parts are still valid and which aren't. Using the wrong bit could be a major mistake. It really highlights why staying current is so vital.
It all really hammers home that key point. Knowing the status of a standard is just as vital as knowing what's in it. You absolutely don't want to build something using outdated rules. That's the real-world impact, isn't it? Keeping up with this dynamic landscape is fundamental to safety and quality.
Absolutely. It underpins the integrity of pretty much everything we engineer and manufacture. It's about building safety in and then constantly learning and adapting.
So we've really journeyed through this crucial world, haven't we? Codes, standards, specifications. We went from the definitions to how they're used, the role of authority, quality manuals, and how they're constantly changing. You should now have a much better sense of how these documents ensure quality, ensure safety, in everything from bridges to welding.
Yeah, we've seen how they create that optimum order, how they guide people, how they're backed by authorities and detailed manuals, and how they evolve. It's this complex but essential ecosystem quietly keeping things working.
It truly is. It's so easy to just trust that the bridge holds or the gadget works. But digging into these codes and standards, you see this unseen effort, this meticulous system safeguarding so much of modern life. So here's something to think about. In a world changing so fast, new materials, new tech all the time, how do these systems, these codes and standards keep up? How do they ensure safety and quality without accidentally stifling innovation? What's that constant tension, between established practice and future possibilities mean for inspection for manufacturing?
That is the ongoing challenge, isn't it? Balancing safety and reliability with progress and innovation. It's a fascinating, continuous effort.